Hello YouTube. This time around I wanted to go over something I haven't seen on the internet at all yet, and that's your view through the viewfinder of some older cameras. I've got a fairly decent selection. I'm not sure how far I'm going to go with this. It depends on how many cameras I can dig up that still work. So I can explain them better. Just wanted to go over what you're going to see through the viewfinder of some different cameras. It can make a big difference in your selection of what you might want to buy, because not all viewfinders are created equal, and the options and what's included can vary quite a lot from one to another, particularly in old cameras. So moving right along, the first one is probably the most basic and the most common. This is your view tastefully recreated with a Sharpie of basically what you're going to see looking through the viewfinder of a Pentax K1000, Spotmatic, and the KM series. And these are all, this is pretty simple, as basic gets. You have a full view, and your meter is just like it looks, the plus and minus. As you adjust your aperture and your shutter speed, this needle will sweep up or down. This is your sweet spot right in here where you want the needle to sit for your basic exposure. Most of, although not all, of the K1000s, and I think all of the Spotmatics, have prism focusing. Now, I never liked prism focusing anyhow, but particularly now that I don't have the eyes of a 20-year-old, the prisms are hard for me. I'm a slow, ponderous focuser anyways, and the prism I don't think is conducive to rapid focusing. Basically, it's not unlike here in the digital age, pixelating. Pixelated section right in the center. And the theory is that as you adjust your focus, your view through that little prismed area becomes clearer and sharper, which, as I said, is fine mostly when you're got the eyes of a 20-year-old and you don't need glasses. It's been a while since my eyes were 20 years old, so I never liked the prism. I don't like it today. It makes focusing for me much more difficult. The newer K1000s, I've seen a couple, had split image, which is my personal preference. Next up is one of my personal favorites. It's a Minolta SRT101. And this is it here with a two-power teleconverter, automatic. This one is kind of cool. Looking through the viewfinder, you're going to have, so I get a decent picture of this. This camera happens to have a split image surrounded by a prism. Now, I'm not exactly sure why anyone would do that. I'm not a professional photographer. I'm not an engineer, so I don't get any of this. Why you would surround a split image with a prism, unless it's just to make it more obvious what your focus point is. I don't know. This one has a split image, which is what I prefer. I've also seen them with the prism focusing, again, which I don't like. One of the neat things that this camera will do is along the bottom here, as you're looking through the viewfinder, I would give you a view through the viewfinder, except none of my digital equipment is good enough to look through the viewfinder and give you a decent image that amounts to anything. Along the bottom, looking through the viewfinder, you're going to see all of your shutter settings from bulb all the way to 1,000th of a second is what this one's calibrated for. And it's got an indicator that as you change your shutter speeds, that indicator, as you're looking through, that indicator will slide back and forth, showing you what shutter speed you have selected. It'll also has a neat, quirky exposure guide. As you look through the viewfinder and you press, let's see, you have to turn it on. You would turn, oh, I left it on. You would turn your meter on. As you look through, this needle, depending on what your shutter speed and aperture are set at, is going to swing to a natural position, and as you adjust your aperture, this needle will come down and meet with that plain straight needle, and when the two are in line, that is your proper exposure according to what the meter thinks. And I like that just because it is kind of cool, and you don't see it a lot in cameras. You also have your battery check point, and to do that you would go again to your meter on off switch. You would go from off or on to BC, which is battery check. And if your battery is any good, that needle will swing down and be in line with that square that's in your viewfinder. I like this. I think that's just a neat way of doing it. I like being able to see my shutter speeds without having to pick up my eye or move the camera down to look through. And as you adjust your shutter speed, this needle will change accordingly. And this one works, I think, exclusively off of the aperture. And when the two come together, that's your proper exposure according to what the onboard meter thinks. Next is one of my definitely personal, most favorite cameras in general, and rangefinders or viewfinders in particular. My Canon L1, and when these came out, they were certainly cutting edge. They were really awesome cameras, and they still are today. This one takes amazing pictures. It really, really does. The glass is great. It has a very cool metering system. You can't, I'm pretty sure you won't be able to see it from here, but if you could, you might be able to see. Yeah, you can see the lines in the mirror through the lens. Those are not cracks. Those are engineered etchings in the mirror that do something magical and allow the meter to be fabulous. I don't know what else to say about it. It does great. You can't see it through the viewfinder itself, but through the lens you can see the etching in the glass. But anyhow, looking through the viewfinder on a Canon L1, now I believe this to be similar to all the other Canon in the A series, the AE1, and I don't know how many other variants there were, but I'm fairly certain that they're all similar. You have on your right here, as you're looking through, you have your shutter speeds. I didn't write them all in, but it goes from 2 to 1,000. You have a red line here that ends in a series of spaced dots. This one also has a built-in battery test through the viewfinder, and you press a little black button right there, and if that needle swings up into the position where you see it above what in your viewfinder will be a red line here, If it swings up to this position, your battery is good. This is your focus point. This has I think it's infrared sonar. I can't think now what it's called, but it has built-in range finding. And that's your focus point for when you depress the button, the shutter button halfway, the focus begins to work. Now it's not an automatic focus. That's just what it's going to focus on when you're framing your picture. In the bottom here, and this is the cool thing for guys who don't have the eyes of a 20-year-old kid, you have two red triangles and a green dot in the middle. Now as you're focusing on this point, if you're out of focus, one of these two red triangles will light up, and that actually is pointing in the direction you would have to turn the focus ring. If this one lights up, you turn the focus ring that way. If this one lights up, you turn the focus ring that way. When you're in focus, that green dot lights up. That makes it real sweet to focus in a hurry. It's much quicker than I am, because as I said, I'm a ponderous focuser. And it's also full frame focusing. Now that doesn't mean everything's going to be in focus at the same time. It means instead of just one dot coming into focus, your whole frame will look essentially the same, but whatever point is in these two brackets will be what the camera is actually going to be reading from as you turn the focus ring. And I like not having the obstruction of either a split image or the prism focusing in the middle. It's all just one big frame with just these two brackets. Much more modern than most of my cameras. Most of my cameras have the thing in the middle. I have a couple of very new, well, for me they're very new cameras that don't have all that stuff in the center of the frame. Just brackets and lines for framing and focusing points. And this is just awesome, and I really like using this camera. And that focus indicator light just is sweet. It really is. Again, I'm no engineer and I'm no scientist and I'm not a pro photographer, but I just like that feature. And combined with the camera itself, it takes awesome pictures and it's very easy to work with. This camera is, I believe, a little over 30 years old, and it works and very nearly looks as good as the day it was built, and it's just a pleasure to work with. And that's it for that one. Next is the Minolta HighMatic F, which is a very small 35mm camera. You can see that fits right in the palm of the hand right there. This is from, I'm not exactly sure, I think the 60s. But it's a rangefinder camera that does pretty much everything for you. It's self-metering, has all the usual functions of a 35mm camera. And looking through the viewfinder of this, you'll see and one thing about the rangefinders is they have a different view setup. Very often, in most of them, you'll have a border, which in most of the ones that I've seen have been either yellow or gold, translucent. And in some cases, I don't happen to have any, but in some cases they're also parallax corrected. So if you are looking at your subject like this, as you adjusted the focus, the actual frame would alter to correct the parallax view. I don't happen to have any of those. I've used a couple and they're pretty neat. This one does not have the parallax correct. For features, it's pretty barren. It has up here in the corner what would be a red dot that would appear as you're setting up for your shot. If the meter senses that the shutter speed is going to be below a 30th of a second, there will be a red dot that will appear right up here, and that'll tell you that your exposure is going to be underexposed, or at least a slow shutter. And the other thing also on the right hand side is like a lightning bolt. Now the manual says this will only appear when your flash is properly installed. Mine is on all the time. I don't know if it's old age, a defect, or something. I had to do some repairs to this camera, so there could be something different about it now. But my little lightning bolt, translucent gold lightning bolt, is always there. The flash does work. Other than that, you have full view. This one is also a split image, and if you don't know what split image is, here is a really high-tech graphic explanation. As you're looking through the viewfinder, you'll see two images, and that's through the wonder of mirrors, lenses, and sometimes prisms, from light going in through two portions of the body, usually above the lens, going in and being combined right at the eyepiece. As you adjust your focus, you'll see those two images come together, and when the two images come together so that they form one image, you're in focus. Now, sometimes with these older cameras you'll have them so that they come together at peculiar odds. That's an adjustment issue. Really all they have to do is come together in a straight vertical line, at least in my experience, and that gives you your focus. I like split image rangefinders. I think they're very easy to work with. If the lenses are kept halfway clean, your view is very good, and I just think they're an underappreciated method of focusing. And finally, just for some contrast, I brought in my Bell & Howell Director Series 8mm movie camera working. I'm going to give you a look at what the inside of the viewfinder looks like in that. Looking through the viewfinder on the movie camera, it's similar, but you have cast into the plastic lens are three sets of lines. The smallest in the middle, and that's all it is just a line cast into the plastic. That's your telephoto view. The next line out gives you your normal view, and then the wide angle is the largest in the top left. And this is cool because it's all done with mirrors, and it's not really fiber optic. It's just light passing through lengths of plexiglass. It's very cool. Done with all done with mirrors and plastic and ambient light. Anyhow, as you're looking through, you've got your choice of views, which you achieve by turning the three lens to turret, and as you turn the turret, one of the three settings will appear in the upper left hand window. In the upper right hand window, you have your film speed, which is in a little window here, which is kind of irrelevant today because the film speeds that this camera was actually made to use are impossible to find, and the films are actually faster now. But you also have your aperture settings, and you can't, I don't know if you can probably see, but in the manual setting you turn this dial and there's a red line that moves back and forth to tell you what aperture you're at. and that in turn would be reflected here in your upper right hand view. So if you were adjusting the camera and you wanted to know what aperture you had, you would just turn the knob and it would show that little red line would move across to whatever you've got it set at. It's kind of dim. I'm not sure how handy it really is, but it's a cool feature, and that is basically what you would see looking through the viewfinder on a Bell & Howell movie camera. I just thought I'd throw that in there for a little contrast. And that's it for now.